How much money is enough? If you are serious about building your wealth like I am, you've probably asked yourself this question, and perhaps you already have a number in your head. You have an exact dollar figure of how much money you want to make in your lifetime. But there's a huge problem here. Firstly, it's a much more complicated question than it first appears on the surface. And we're going to talk about how to define that number if you haven't already, but also why that number will change throughout your life. But most importantly, we're going to discuss how to avoid the massive pitfall of ending up on the hamster wheel of more money. And when I say massive pitfall, I know that sounds clickbaity and dramatic, but I genuinely mean it. There are plenty of stories that you can find online, or you might know someone in your life that got stuck on that hamster wheel and it completely destroyed their life. And while I acknowledge that a single YouTube video is probably not going to save you if you find yourself on that hamster wheel, hopefully I am able to plant a seed in your mind to recognize before you get on that hamster wheel so that you're able to make better decisions and create a life that you're actually proud of and not end up miserable like a lot of ultra rich people end up. So without further ado, let's dive in. What's up everyone? This is Brandon from Wealth Potion, where we talk about business, money, building wealth, and all of these great financial topics, but we keep it fun and simple because these are topics that we should have learned in school, but unfortunately we didn't. And today we're talking about a very popular topic in personal finance, which is how much money do you need to retire or to quit your job and start a business or to spend more time with your family, whatever that is. In a previous video, we've talked about this and we've defined it as your financial freedom number. You've probably had this kind of conversation with your friends or family. How much money would you need to achieve before you fill in the blank? So first and foremost, if you haven't calculated that number, I want to quickly shout out on the website, wealthpotion.com, you can find a free financial freedom calculator where you can plug in how much money you're making, how much money you're saving, and you can actually see what your number might be at the current rate that you're at. There are plenty of ways to calculate your financial freedom number, but that is one of them. You, of course, can just go with your gut feeling, right? For a long time when I was growing up, I just thought, you know what? I want to achieve $10 million. That sounds like a pretty nice number where I wouldn't have to work. And as mentioned, perhaps many of you already have a number in your head. And that's where I want to talk about the first lesson today, which is that number is not fixed. I am in my early 30s. I know a lot of commenters have shared that I don't look that old. I take it as a compliment, but I share that because when I was early in my career, heck, when I was in school, my number was very different than what it is now. In fact, my number kind of grew as I got more and more successful in my career. And then lately, I found that my number is dropping. And speaking with other people in my age group, in my generation, I've noticed that that is a common trend. Regardless of where you're at in your journey, where you're at in your career, that's a very important takeaway, which is that number is going to change. And it's going to change for a lot of reasons. Personally, I found that my number changed as my career evolved. As I started making more money, I started wanting more money. Your number can also change because of life circumstances. For example, if you get married and you want to start having children with your spouse, that will likely change your math on how much money you want to have, because perhaps prior to that point, you were just thinking about how much money you need to have saved, but now you're starting to think about your children. And of course, it's worth shouting out, a topic we've talked about before, but your number is also going to change because of inflation. $10 million 10 years ago is very different from $10 million today. In fact, I'm going to do the math when I'm editing this video, but my guess is that $10 million 10 years ago is probably more like $14 million today. We'll see how I did on that guesstimate there. So that's the first lesson today, is obviously figure out your number if you haven't already, but be aware that that number is going to change, and that is totally normal. So be open to it, reflect on your number regularly. But now I want to talk about this major pitfall I mentioned, and I'm not going to leave it till the end of the video. I will just talk about it right up front here, which is, I'm sure you've heard stories of very, very rich people that build all this wealth, but their life is just miserable. They are terrible people, they are divorced, their kids hate them, whatever it might be. It doesn't have to be that extreme, but in short, they have achieved immense wealth in terms of money in the bank account, but their lives are not lives that you would want. You probably wouldn't want to trade places with those people. And the inspiration for this video actually was a conversation I had with some of my friends. If you can't tell by the different background here, I am actually back in Canada, and I recently met up with some childhood friends who are at a similar stage in their career, and they are quite successful. One of them is a serial entrepreneur, another one is in venture capital, and the other one works at a large AI tech company. And so we're all relatively well off from a monetary standpoint. And we had this conversation, what is your number? What do you want to achieve when it comes to building your monetary assets? And it was very interesting to hear that the majority of us, if not all of us, felt the same way, that our number was a lot higher in the past. And now that we're a bit older, we've realized, we don't actually need $10 million, $20 million to live a really fulfilling life. Now, why is that? Well, I think it's because as you get older, as you build your career and you meet more people, you will likely meet someone that falls in that category, someone that has achieved a lot of wealth, but you meet them and you realize their life is pretty miserable and you wouldn't want to live that life. And it makes you realize that while of course money is a great thing, but money does not solve all of your problems. And in fact, money can create more problems. I was listening to the My First Million podcast recently featuring Tim Ferriss, and Tim was asked by the hosts, Sam and Sean, about his number, and they had a very similar conversation around how much money you need to retire or do whatever you want. And Sean Purry, one of the co-hosts of the podcast, shared a very interesting story, and I'll paraphrase a bit here, but he said that he has some friends that are doing exactly that, where they're making so much money and they get to a point where they've probably earned the last dollar they will ever spend. Like, that's how rich they are, but they don't know what else to do with their life, so they just keep earning more money. And that is what I referred to earlier as the hamster wheel of more money. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking, like, oh, what a privileged problem to have. Not all of us are going to achieve that, but there are other versions of that hamster wheel. You do not have to be, post-economic worth $10 million or more to get to a point where making more money is not serving you. That might happen a lot sooner than you think. And so what is the takeaway here? It is define what it is you want outside of money. And there's a lot of ways you can frame this question. So what I would recommend you do is get out a journal, like literally write this down, or better yet, draw it, create some pictures in your journal, and answer the question. If you had that amount of money, whatever your number is, how would you spend your time? What would you do? Would you actually quit your job, or would you continue working where you're at? Would you travel the world? Would you move closer to family? Would you have kids or have more kids or whatever it is? There's no wrong answers here, but it's really important that you have that defined, because if you don't, then you are going to end up like Sean's friend. And I love this quote from the podcast that Sean says is, this guy is trading great hours for useless dollars. You do not want to end up in that situation. And again, I want to emphasize this is not just for once you've achieved your number. Yes, the thought exercise is to think about what would happen when you achieve your number, but let me tell you what's going to happen. You're going to draw this image, you're going to write out all the things that you want to achieve after you've achieved your number. You're going to want to start doing those things before you achieve your number. So just as an example here to illustrate this, if your number is $5 million and in your thought exercise, you want to start a family, you want to have a beach house property, you want to surf more, you want to live closer to your family, you want to be able to provide for your parents, and let's say you only have 100 grand saved, you're far away from that $5 million number. Okay, maybe you can't get that beachfront property, but you could take up surfing lessons. You could start buying some small gifts for your family or visit your parents more often and help do the dishes when they're getting older. There are small things that you can start doing while you're still building your wealth. And that's why I think this exercise is so powerful, especially if you tend to be somewhat single-minded where you're focused on making money and you push everything else to the side. That's well and good, but at some point, you're going to want to reintegrate all those other things into your life. In full transparency, I'm not at that point yet where I can just quit and sail off into the sunset, but I can almost guarantee you that if you do this, if you complete this thought exercise and you start integrating some of those things you want into your life before you've achieved your number, you will reduce your risk of ending up on the hamster wheel very, very significantly. And I'm gonna leave you off with a short little story here. This was a post on the subreddit fatFire. If you're familiar with the FIRE movement, that's financial independence, retire early. fatFire is a community for people that want to retire early, but with a fat nest egg. So there's not really an exact number, but that is in that $5 million, $10 million, $20 million range. It's a very fascinating subreddit if you want to understand the mind of some of these rich people, and you will see a lot of these stories that I'm talking about where people have sacrificed so much in their lives only to realize that that extra couple $1 million wasn't really adding anything to their life. But there was a post on fatFire that I want to read out to you. It got upvoted a ton on the subreddit at the time, but it also has gone viral recently on X or Twitter. It was reposted there and it's been getting millions of views. I'm going to read it out very quickly. The title is, "I have a secret to share. Shh. After the first 2 to 3 millions, a paid off home, and a good car, there is no difference in quality of life between you and Jeff Bezos. Both of you have limited amount of time on Earth. You have twice, if not more, than Jeff, so you are richer than him. A cheeseburger is a cheeseburger whether a billionaire eats it or you do. Money is nothing but a piece of paper or a number in your app. Real life is outdoors. Become financially independent. That's usually 2 to 3 million. Have good food. Enjoy your relationships. Work out and enjoy sex. Sleep well. Call your parents. That's all there is to life. Greed has no end. Repeat after me. Time is the currency of life. Money is not. The sooner you figure this out, the happier you will be." Again, I mentioned the context of fatFire because this kind of goes against what these fatFire people are all trying to achieve. And yet it struck a chord with people. And I think it's because there is a deep truth to this. If you're interested in hearing more of a breakdown on this post, I actually comment more on it in this week's email newsletter. You can go to wealthpotion.com, you can sign up for the newsletter there, or you can just read any of my prior posts just on the website itself. But I think that post really encapsulates what I'm trying to get across in this video. Firstly, yes, figure out your number. Everyone does this at some point in their life, but recognize that that number is going to change based on your life circumstances. And then, most importantly, define other things that you want in your life beyond that dollar figure. And really spend time defining that. Write it out, draw it in your journal. You'd be surprised how many people I've spoken to that have never done this. Maybe they have an idea in their head, but they've never really made it concrete. And you can tell I'm passionate about this because I genuinely believe that this is the remedy to the hamster wheel of more money, and it will help you avoid becoming that miserable rich person that has a terrible life. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.